Hello, welcome to episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Thursday, June 29th. Hopefully everyone's having a good day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. What a night last night for the New York Yankees. The 24th perfect game in MLB history, the fourth in Yankees history. Domingo German with an efficient 27 up, 27 down as the New York Yankees defeat the Oakland A's in the second game of a three-game set, 11-0. We'll get into it to start the program, so I won't say too much of it right now. We'll get into it on the first topic today, but what a night if you're a New York Yankees fan, and you can only hope that this is the start of a turnaround, which has been a rough season so far. It's been a very up and down season so far. There's been a lot of injuries. There's been a lot of just frustrating moments. I mean, Tuesday night was about as frustrating as it gets, losing 2-1 to the A's, and then 24 hours later, you get an absolute beatdown. You get a 6-run fifth inning, which blew the game wide open. And then you get a Domingo German perfect game, 27 up, 27 down, and like I mentioned, was efficient, 99 pitches, or I believe it was, 99 pitches, 72 strikes. That's about as good as you're going to get for a perfect game. So we'll get into it to start today's program. The Mets took another tough loss last night, so they have now not won a series in the month of June. The last time they won a series was the series to end May and the first day of June against the Phillies, where they swept Philly. And since that point, they have not won a series. Last night, they didn't officially lose the series, because tonight they can win and split the series, but obviously that's not a series win. So the Mets go the entire month of June without a series win with the loss last night. Steve Cohen spoke yesterday. I thought he said a lot of things that were, again, it's not going to make you as a Met fan probably feel better about the season. Like, you're not coming away today. You're not getting up today as a New York Met fan, especially after the loss last night, saying, oh, man, I'm really happy. This season's going to get turned around because of what Steve Cohen said yesterday. But I thought in terms of what he could have said and the potential of him going out there and just saying, oh, I believe in who we've got. We're going to turn this thing around. Everything's okay. I did think there was definitely a sense of accountability, a sense of frustration from him that maybe, I guess people were probably expecting, but I thought I thought he did pretty well. Again, it wasn't your ruthless press conference where he went out and said, again, he didn't go out and said, oh, everybody's jobs are on the line. Everybody's on the hot seat right now. If things don't turn around within the next week, there's going to be major changes. Like, he didn't come out like that with his hair on fire. But I thought he handled it well. I thought he answered a lot of the questions well. I thought he said a lot of things that at least show you that there's frustration. At least he showed a little bit of a sense of accountability. But we'll get into that later on. We'll obviously start today's program talking about Domingo German, talking about his historic perfect game performance last night. We'll get into some numbers. We'll get into the history that he falls into. We'll look at the other 23 perfect games, and that will be history as well, and the company that Domingo German and Kyle Higashioka, the catcher, enter into. And we'll obviously get to Steve Cohen's press conference, and we'll get you ready for the final game of the four-game set between the Mets and the Brewers, and the final game of a three-game set for the Yankees and the A's tonight. So the Yankees go for the series win. We'll see what Clark Schmidt can do as an encore. Can Clark Schmidt follow it up with a perfect game? We'll obviously see how that all takes place tonight. Probably not, but it is fun to, let's see. Maybe Domingo, maybe we get, Clark Schmidt perfect game tonight. We get two perfect games in a row. Not going to happen, but we'll see what Clark Schmidt can do in the series finale, the rubber game of the three-game set before heading to St. Louis for a three-game set starting tomorrow. Mets will obviously welcome in San Francisco starting tomorrow for a three-game set at Citi Field to close out a seven-game homestand. All right, so let's start off with the Domingo German stuff. So, what a night last night. Last night is just basically it's just baseball at its finest. Like, Tuesday night, the Yankees go out in Oakland, lose 2-1, make Paul Blackburn look like an all-star, make Paul Blackburn look like this really good pitcher as he threw 5 1/3, had 5 strikeouts, and only allowed 1 run. Yankees lose 2-1. Johnny Brito pitched well. And then you go into last night, and not only did Domingo German throw a perfect game, but after scoring 1 run the night before, the Yankees go out there and put up 11 and a 6th-run 5th inning absolutely tee off on J.P. Sears, former Yankee, by the way. Who it's funny because exactly 1 year ago yesterday, J.P. Sears was getting ready to pitch for the Yankees against the A's, and now yesterday, exactly 1 year ago from yesterday, he was an Oakland A getting ready to pitch for against the Yankees. So he obviously got dealt at the deadline to the A's in the Frankie Montes deal last year. So it's funny when you look at last night how much a year can make for a pitcher, how much a year can make for a player, especially with the trade deadline and stuff like that. And then obviously you get the Domingo German perfect game. But it's just crazy because Tuesday night was such a brutal night. And I came on here yesterday and I was, we were all frustrated. I mean, you can't lose a game like that to the Oakland A's. It was a pathetic performance. They couldn't hit. They their pitching was fine, but they couldn't hit. They strung together 7 hits and 1 run against the Oakland A's, and 3 of those hits came against Anthony Volpe, or came for Anthony Volpe. So then to get last night, to get a perfect game, to get 11-0 win, to have 24 hours later to have it just completely turn around is baseball. Like, that is baseball. One night it is so bad, and then the next night you come out and not only do you put up 11 runs, but you get the 24th perfect game, and that will be history. And any given night in baseball, the saying is true. I know it's any given Sunday in football, but you never know what you're going to get over the course of 162. I always say, I go back to the Corey Kluber no-hitter 2 years ago when he did it in Texas against the Rangers, who at the time was his former team, who he signed on to in the 2020 season, only pitched about an inning, and had the shoulder injury, came back to Texas, threw the no-hitter. Kyle Gashioka also caught that no-hitter. And it's funny, like, that was a random game. Corey Kluber, not the same pitcher he once was, goes out there and throws a no-hitter. And it was like, it was so random. Like, it wasn't like, and again, it was Corey Kluber who, when you think of the guys that can throw perfect games, think of the guys that can throw no-hitters, it's like the Garrett Coles enter your mind in terms of Yankee pitchers. Obviously, there's so many guys across the MLB that enter your mind in terms of guys that could potentially throw a perfect game. But it's always like the big names, and then just randomly, here comes Domingo German on a Wednesday night in Oakland, throws a perfect game. So he lands into history. He was awesome. And again, I don't want to, obviously that's the obvious thing to say, but it's funny because Domingo German going into this performance had a really rough June going for him. Going into this performance, it wasn't good, and he allowed 17 runs in his last 2 outings. Now, 15 of those 17 were earned. But still, his last 2 outings against Boston during that 4-game losing streak in Boston, that game they lost 15-5, that game Domingo German started. And in the final game, exactly a week later, today's a week later. Just exactly a week ago today, Domingo German pitched 3 1/3 and allowed 10 runs, 8 earned, 4 homers against the Mariners, and they lost 10-2 in that game. So his last 2 outings haven't been good. His month of May as a whole, coming out of last night, his month of May as a whole is a 5.67 ERA. And I believe going into the game last night, he had an ERA, it was ugly. I mean, it was up, it was bad, his ERA in June after the last 2 outings, not even able to get out of the 4th inning. So to be able to go in there last night, pitch the way he pitched, again, I've talked about German this season. He's put together a very good season. He's had 2 really bad outings. That's really been it. Again, you can go all the way back to April and say that outing that he had against the Twins was pretty bad, where he allowed 6 runs and 3 homers. That gets lost in the shuffle a little bit because the Yankees ended up winning that game. But all in all this year, I know, when you look at the overall numbers, especially recently, went into the game last night with an ERA above 5 at 5.10, comes out of it with an ERA at 4.54. German's been a very good weapon for us, despite the last 2 outings. And last night was efficient. A lot of times you look at and I could probably do more digging and more, look at to see what other perfect games were in terms of pitch counts. But last night, German was efficient. He threw 99 pitches, 9 strikeouts, 72 of those 99 pitches were strikes. He was efficient. He was throwing strikes. His curveball was great. That was the best his curveballs looked since that Dodgers start where he struck out 6 over 6 2/3, and he only allowed the 1 homer to J.D. Martinez, 4 hits throughout those innings. So throughout those 6 2/3 against the Dodgers, that's the best he's looked. The curveball was very good. The curveball this season for German's been great. And I think watching the perfect game's great. And I always say that. We always say that in baseball. Like, watching, it's always fun to watch. But I think one thing about baseball, too, is when you look back at the box score, it's even better because you see the 9 innings, you see a 0 under the hits, 0 under the runs, 0 under the earned runs, 0 under the homers, 0 under the walks, and in however many strikeouts, he had 9 of those last night. German was phenomenal. When you look at his overall numbers now, he's 5-5 with a 4.54 ERA, 78 strikeouts, and a whip of 1.05. So, history in Oakland last night for Domingo German. And I want to quickly say this. Because you always get these people, you always get these fans. I don't know if it's jealousy. I don't know if it's just trolling. It's probably a little bit of everything. Maybe, trolling, jealousy, whether you just hate the Yankees and anything they do, you gotta combat it with something negative. But you get these fans today on social media. Most of them are Astros fans, which makes sense because Astros and Yankees, we hate each other. Now, if Framber Valdez went out there and pitched a perfect game against the Oakland A's, I wouldn't say, it was the A's. But you get all these people that are like, the Yankees, Domingo German, it's easy to throw a perfect game against the Oakland A's. Give me a break. A perfect game is one of the hardest things to do, not only in baseball, but in all of sports. Like, there's definitely things to do in all of sports that are extremely difficult. I mean, basketball triple-doubles now are, quadruple doubles are rare. Very hard to do. Triple doubles happen night in, night out basis. They just do. They're not really that rare. It's a great accomplishment. They're not that rare, though, especially when you had guys like Russell Westbrook that have put up triple doubles nightly. They average a triple double for their season, a couple years back with Westbrook. So, there's definitely things in sports like quarterbacks. You always look at the touchdowns, and like 6 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns in a game is like great. You look at field goals, and 60-plus yard field goals are extremely difficult. Those things definitely land into history. But perfect games are one of the hardest things to do in all of sports when you look at, the history books and how difficult it is. So I don't want to hear, and it just shows you like how like negative do you have to be when a guy throws a no-hitter to go out there and say, it's the Oakland A's. So here's my question to those fans. Maybe some of you are watching, maybe you aren't. I don't expect many Astros fans to be watching. But for those of you out there that are saying that, here's my question. How many no-hitters and perfect games have been thrown against the Oakland A's this year? How many perfect games have been thrown against the Oakland A's this season? If it's that easy, how many? Leave it in the comments down below. I would like to know. If it's that easy to throw a perfect game, if it doesn't count because it's against the Oakland A's, who aren't good, I understand that. But a perfect game is a perfect game. It's extremely difficult to do. You know how hard it is to bring your best stuff, retire 27 up, 27 down without walking or letting up a hit? And you got to give credit to the defense as well. They've got to make the plays. You can't make an error. An error, that's a no-hitter. That's not a perfect game. Like, you've got to be perfect defensively. You've got to put up some runs offensively. And obviously the pitcher and the catcher have got to be working together at an extremely successful rate. So, for those of you that are saying that, leave it in the comments down below. How many perfect games have been thrown against the Oakland A's this year? I want to know. It's 0. But it's for all those that say, it's so easy, then why are we 80-plus games into the year? And if it's so easy, why haven't we seen a perfect game since 2012 then? So it's just pathetic. And I know I'm probably wasting time talking about that because it's just trolls. It's just people that are negative. It's people that probably know very little about baseball. And I got to tell you something. To the Houston Astros, and it's fans all over, but I've seen a couple on social media, on Twitter specifically. I've seen a couple Houston Astros fans say, and it hasn't been, I'm sure other fan bases I'm saying, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple Rays fans, maybe a couple Blue Jays, Red Sox fans, a couple of the other Yankee rivals that are saying stuff. But for those of you Astros fans that are talking, you're a half game out of the wild card spot. So I wouldn't be too worried about what the Yankees are doing right now, because if the season were to end right now, you wouldn't be in the playoffs. You would be out golfing in the offseason. So I just wanted to get that off my chest, because it's just ridiculous how people, when somebody makes history, when you witness greatness, which, again, over the course of 162, it's nights like last night that make you really love baseball, really enjoy baseball, because anything can happen any given night over the course of a 162-game season. And that's the beauty of baseball. And to just see these fans try and bring down another fan base, try to bring down a player after he does something great is just so frustrating. It's just so it's stupid. It's just I really don't know what else to say. So I'll move on from that. But I just wanted to get that out there because it's ridiculous. And, it's saying, oh, it's easy to throw a perfect game against the Oakland A's. So those of you behind that, behind the screen that say it's easy, you go out there and pitch a perfect game. Let's see it. Let's see it. Let's see you go out there in an MLB and pitch a perfect game. So I wanted to get into, some of the history of obviously the perfect game. So again, 24th all time. So last night was the 4th in Yankees history. Don Larson, Yogi Berra first did it in 1956. If you remember, that was obviously the only perfect game in the World Series. So definitely some extra added history to that one. David Wells and Jorge Posada did it in 1998. David Cohen and Joe Girardi, which was the last perfect game for the Yankees going into last night, did it in 1999. And then last night, Domingo German, Kyle Higashioka did it June 28th, 2023. And it's funny because the game ended after midnight. So it was June 28th on the West Coast in Oakland, but it was June 29th on the East Coast. So it obviously is technically June 28th, but it's funny when the game officially ended, it was technically June 29th on the East Coast, but it still counts as June 28th, 2023. And it's funny, not that this matters, but Don Larson, David Wells, David Cohn, Domingo German, the 4 Ds have all completed perfect games in Yankees history. So you've been pretty successful if your first name starts with a D and you're a pitcher for the New York Yankees, because 4 Ds have now thrown a perfect game in Yankees history. So that was definitely cool to see. The first one, obviously, since 1999 for the Yankees, and the first one since 2012 for the MLB. So here's a list of just some of the guys that have thrown perfect games over the years. So the last one was obviously Felix Hernandez, who threw one August 15th, 2012 versus the Rays. Matt Cain threw one June 13th, 2012 versus the Astros. So it's funny because 2012 we saw 3. April 21st, Philip Humber of the White Sox threw one against the Mariners. So there was 3 perfect games in 2012. And it kind of reminded me of 2021 when there was a bunch of no-hitters. 2012, there was 3 different perfect games. Mariners had one thrown for them with Felix Hernandez in August, and in that April, they also had one thrown against them. Roy Halladay of the Phillies threw one May 29th of 2010 against the Marlins. Dallas Braden, May 9th, 2010 against the Rays. So, yeah, 2 perfect games in 2010. Mark, I've been trying to figure out this name the entire morning as I put my list together of the 24 perfect games in MLB history. I still can't seem to get it. Mark Bureau, I don't know. Of the White Sox threw one July 23rd, 2009 versus the Rays. Randy Johnson, obviously one of the greatest to ever do it, threw one May 18th, 2004 against the Braves. Obviously David Cohn, David Wells, as I mentioned, did it in 1998, 1999 with Cohn. Kenny Rogers of the Rangers did it in July 28th, 1994 against the Angels. Dennis Martinez of the Expos did it July 28th, 1991 against the Dodgers. Tom Browning of the Reds did it in September 16th, 1998 versus the Dodgers. Mike Witt of the Angels did it September 30th, 1984 against the Rangers. Len Baker of the Indians did it May 15th, 1981 versus the Blue Jays. Catfish Hunter of the A's. Funny, the A's got it against them last night. You also have some history there with them. May 8th, 1968 against the Twins. Sandy Koufax of the Dodgers, one of the greatest to ever do it as well. September 9th, 1965 against the Cubs. Jim Bunning of the Phillies, this is going back June 21st, 1964 against the Mets. Obviously had Don Larson's perfect game in the World Series. Charlie Robertson of the White Sox did it in 1922. Addie Jose of the Cleveland Naps at the time, 1908. Cy Young did it in 1904. John Ward did it in 1880. Lee Richmond did it in 1880 as well on June 12th. So going all the way back to the 1800s. To only have 24 perfect games just shows you how rare it is. And obviously the first one since 2012. So it's been a while because you had this stretch from 2010 to 2012 where there was a lot. There was 3 in 2012. And even in the 90s, you had 98 with David Wells. And in the 99, you had it with Cohen. So back-to-back years, you had it, back-to-back seasons for the Yankees there, and then now to not have one since now 2023. It's definitely been a minute. So we'll see when the next perfect game is. 27 up, 27 down. First one since 2012. King Felix did it with the Mariners. So history like that you don't get too often. So anytime you witness that, you definitely gotta remember it. And this is definitely one you'll remember. And again, now you get the people that you start to wonder, does this spark the Yankees? And I really hope it does. I mean, again, this is a team right now that you looked at the game last night, it was ugly. Or not last night. You look at the game the night before, I should say. Tuesday night, it was ugly. You lose 2-1. First game against the A's, you should sweep the A's. The minimal, you should win 2 of 3, which you have a chance to do tonight with Schmidt on the mound, who's been better, definitely better recently after his really rough start to the season. But the Yankees now currently stand 44-36, 9.5 back in the East. They're 5-5 in their last 10, and they're currently a half game up in the wild card. The 3 wild card teams right now are the Orioles, the Yankees, and the Blue Jays. So you have the Astros and the Angels fighting there. They're both a half game back. So it's basically a 4-team race because the Blue Jays are +5 up in the wild card. Unless if they completely sink and there's injuries and stuff like that, they're going to be in. So, and the Orioles are one of the better teams this year in baseball. The Orioles have a chance to go pretty deep. So, hopefully this sparks the Yankees. Hopefully this lights a fire under them. You get a big moment like this. You get a big historic, you get a perfect game. That's all I have to say. There's no other way around it. I don't have to say history. I don't have to say big moment. It was a perfect game. We all know what that means. We all know how hard that is. Hopefully this is a moment that lights a fire under this Yankee team, gets them the hit, because they hit last night. 11-0, 6 runs in the 5th. Anthony Volpe continues to swing it a little bit, 2 for 4. He had the perfect, beautiful bunt. Batting average now way above the batting average now again continuing to go above the Mendoza line. Went into last night 203 after the 3-hit night on Tuesday. Comes out of last night hitting 208. So he's got 5 hits in 2 games this series. And he's been much better ever since he met with Austin Wells and made those adjustments. He's been much better really ever since that Mets game dating back to June 13th, the first game of that Subway Series where he had 2 hits. Since then, he's been very good. And I go back to that because he was batting 191 at that point. Since then, now he's gone all the way up to 208. So his batting average over just a 2-week span, because it was actually, about 2 weeks yesterday, over a 2-week span, or 2 weeks Tuesday, over a 2-week span, his batting average has increased from 191 to 208. That's 17 points. So it's definitely good to see. Overall this month, he's putting together probably his best month of the season, where his slash line's 250, 324, 422, 746. So there's a lot to like there from what you're seeing from Volpe here over these past couple games, especially going 5 for 8 so far with a double and a run scored in these 2 games against the A's. We'll see if he can continue that tonight. And something that's under the radar, too, with Volpe is he's one of the only players in baseball. I think there's about 6 or 7 of them. Francisco Lindor as well. So the 2 shortstops in New York, Lindor. That's one thing I will say about Lindor. We'll get to the Mets here in a second. Steve Cohen, his press conference, and my takeaways. But Lindor, one thing about Lindor is, again, he hasn't had a very good season. His batting average is extremely low. We know, when you look at the shortstop leaders in terms of home runs and RBIs, he's up there. But one thing you can say about Lindor, he's available. He's out there every game. He's played every game this season. I believe he has. Lindor has. Because he was out of the lineup that one game, and then he came in the next game. Or he came in later that game. So he's played every game. Same thing with Volpe. He's appeared in every game. 80 games in, he's played in all 80 games. So you got to give credit to those guys. Embrace the grind, especially for Volpe. He's a young player. He clearly wants to be out there every day. And he's starting to find it a little bit. And you hope that he can... Hopefully that this starts to, stick a little bit. He had that kind of good stretch towards the end of April. Really rough month of May. Now here in June, although it started rough, these last 2 weeks have been very good. Continue to put it together. And I said that for Volpe. I wanted to see a stretch from Volpe that is more than just 3-4 games. Because we've seen these 3-4 games spurts from him where he'll hit, he'll have a walk-off, then he'll have a 2-hit night, then he'll go 1 for 4 with a double or a homer, and then after that he just goes in extremely 0 for streaks. I want to see continuous from Volpe, and I said going back to that Mets series when he made those adjustments, I said I don't want to see 3-4 games. I want to see a 2-3 week span. And this has been 2 weeks and he's still hitting. Continue that. Let's see it roll into the All-Star break. I would like to see him, get hot. I would like to see him be one of those guys. You always go into the All-Star break and there's those certain guys that you feel like they need it because they're struggling. And then there's those guys that it's like you don't want the All-Star break to come for them because they're hot. I hope Volpe falls under that category where he's hot going into the All-Star break because we're going to need him big time, especially in the second half, depending on how much longer Judge is out. I mean, if Volpe can get right and he can get this batting average, continue to get up and continue to provide a little bit of pop with 10 homers on the season and do his thing. And again, he's been all right defensively. He's made some very big plays. He's definitely made some errors, but he's made some really flashy plays as well. His batting average was low there. It was in the 180s, was in the 190s. It's above the Mendoza line. He's starting to get right a little bit. The adjustments helping. So just keep it going for him. Stanton last night had a good night as well. 2 for 3 with 3 RBIs. He had a homer, he had a walk. Played right field. Hopefully that's something there because, again, we talk about a lot of times, sometimes guys, and Gleyber Torres fell under this category as well, where when they're sometimes out there in the field, they hit better. And it's funny because Torres, Stan falls under that category as well, but Torres was funny because he was at shortstop and he really struggled because he was so worried about his defense. Hitting wasn't right. Defense wasn't right. He was so worried about his defense, it took away from his at-bats. You moved him to second, and it just eased his mind. And, they tried to DH him. It still wasn't working. Sometimes when you put a guy in the field, sometimes it does, because they're not only focused on hitting. Their only focus isn't on hitting. There's other ways. When you're a DH, the only way you're able to help a team is by your bat. You can't, and I'm not saying that Stanton made an incredible play last night, he robbed the homer. Not that you really can at A Stadium because the wall's so high in right field. But not like you robbed the homer, made an incredible diving catch or something. But being out there in the field, at least making a play, getting a couple fly balls, getting your confidence up there, not only worried about your hitting, at least you can help in those other ways. So, and it does it does ease the mind not being in the field. It does, because being a DH, that's your only focus. And if you go 0 for, you really did nothing. At least if you're in the field and you made some plays, even if they're routine, at least you help the team. So sometimes it definitely does help. And again, I always say this, anytime there's a little bit of a stretch there for Stanton, we saw it in that Texas series where he had that rocket single that drove some more runs in that big 8th inning to get the series win on Sunday. You just hope that was the start of something. He didn't do much on Tuesday. Last night, he struck out his first AB, hit the homer, had another big hit. It's all right, let's see it. And look, Donaldson had a double. He had a home run the night before. My biggest issue with Donaldson, he's got to stop looking at these strikes right down the middle. He just got to. It just can't continue. So we'll see. I still don't think Donaldson should be on this team for much longer. He's had 2 hits in the 2 games, a homer and a double, but the strikeouts are extremely frustrating, and looking at them right down the middle in big spots, it just can't happen. So, but Stanton, you just hope that unlocks something last night where it gets him going. You hope that every time he gets a hit, him and LeMahieu as well, and LeMahieu had a hit last night in RBI as well. The offense as a whole, everybody basically hit. Outside of Torres and Rizzo, everybody that was in the game, even Oswaldo, who came in as a pinch runner for Stanton to take over and right, he also had a hit. So everybody that was in the lineup last night contributed for the Yankees. So, and again, 11 runs, 6 in the 5th. Domingo German, perfect game. Just about as perfect as a night as you can ask for the Yankees. So we move on here to the Steve Cohen press conference yesterday. And it's interesting because the Monday night game for the Mets was really rough. They lose 7-2. It was ugly. It was not good whatsoever. It was bad. Now, you go into the game on Tuesday where the Mets go out and win 7-2. They bounce back. They get a big win. Or I apologize. Monday night, they lost 2-1. I apologize. Couldn't hit. They pitched fine. They couldn't hit. Tuesday, they lost. They won 7-2. Very good performance. Overall, offensively, was probably one of their better games of the year. So it was funny because the Steve Cohen press conference was coming off of a win. So, again, things overall for the Mets on the season have been low. They've been rough. But anytime you get a press conference from either an owner or you get a players-only meeting, you always want to come out that next game and win to make it seem like it did something, to make it seem like it energized the team, and that didn't happen last night for the Mets. The Mets lose last night 5-2. They fell down early, put up one more in the bottom of the second, put up more in the bottom of the fourth, made it a 2-2 game, but then the bullpen allowed 3 runs. Ottavino wasn't good. He allowed 2 runs when he came in. I believe, what was it? Grant Hartwig, I think it was, allowed a run as well. So it was ugly for the Mets bullpen after Kodai Senga gave him a really good performance, gave him 5 innings, 102 pitches. Could you have stretched him further? Could you have, could they have kept him out there? I don't know. I mean, he was at 102 pitches. They probably could have. It's kind of the same thing here. Same thing with Verlander, where Verlander gave you 5 strong innings, and you didn't really, he was at 100 pitches over 5 innings. Could you have gave him another inning? Sure. Buck seems to be kind of content with guys giving him 5 innings, even though the bullpen getting you 4 strong innings is extremely difficult, and last night that was. Now, you can't win a game. Winning a game with 2 runs is very hard. So the fact that they put up 2 runs, yes, the bullpen put up, allowed 3, and it wasn't very good, especially Ottavino. Not even able to, 2/3 of an inning, allowed 2 runs. It wasn't good, but at the end of the day, you got to put up more offensively. So despite the Steve Cohen press conference, the Mets still go out there and struggle. And they now fall to 36-44 on the year. They're 17 games back in the NL East. They're 3-7 in their last 10. And really what matters is the wild card, because that's the only hope they've got of getting into the postseason, which I think all hope's lost at this point. I don't think the Mets are making the postseason. Not that that's any shocking development. I think 90% of Met fans probably don't think they're making the postseason. Probably a good 99% of baseball fans don't think they're making the postseason either. They've got a run differential of -17. They're 8.5 back in the National League. And again, the National League wildcard race this year, as we've mentioned almost every day on the show, we talk about the Mets, like, it's been really ugly. Not ugly. It's been crazy. It's been ugly for the Mets, but the wildcard race this season in the National League's just been wild when you look at, like, when you look at the teams like the Padres and the Mets being so down when they were supposed to be right in the heart of it. Like, you thought the Mets and the Braves would be up there. Instead, it's the Marlins currently holding the top wild card spot. Like, nobody saw that coming. So it's definitely been a wild year for both wild cards, really. I mean, even when you look at the American League, like the Astros right now are in the playoffs. That's crazy to think. And I know they're missing Yordan Alvarez, and they're obviously missing some big pieces, but it's just crazy to think, as I mentioned earlier, Astros fans, you right now, if the season went to end today, you wouldn't be in the playoffs. So the wild card for both divisions have been wild. But Steve Cohen spoke yesterday. And again, out of all these things, and I'm going to give you my takeaways, I've got a pretty good amount. I watched it twice. I watched it live, and then I listened to it again and took some notes. This is just my takeaways from the press conference. So again, these are just my observations. Number one, he definitely seemed frustrated. You could see the tone in his voice. He seemed frustrated. He definitely seemed upset. Not that really matters. Not that, if you're a Mets fan watching this, you probably really don't care if he seemed frustrated, because at the end of the day, you got to go out there and perform. And, even if Steve Cohen's frustrated, it's not going to really mean much. But he definitely seemed aggravated. He seemed like, I put a lot of money into this team. These guys aren't performing to a certain extent. The front office, Billy Epler, Buck Showalter aren't doing enough right now, especially Buck Showalter. Maybe some of his in-game decisions aren't helping, aren't doing much. So he definitely seemed frustrated with definitely the way that things have gone this season. I thought this was interesting too. He didn't have an opening statement. He took questions right away. Basically said, hey, I scheduled this interview. The fans are frustrated. Why sit up here and have an opening statement? This isn't what he said, but this was probably just his thought process. Hear it from me. Come, bring it on. Bring it at me. Come at me. Ask me difficult questions. I'll answer them. A lot of these questions are the same questions Mets fans are going to have. Come at me. What is he going to say? Let's be honest here. What is he going to say in an opening statement other than the season's not going good, it's ugly, it's frustrating, we've got to turn this thing around. Like, that's basically what he would say in an opening statement. So he didn't have an opening statement, took questions right away, definitely seemed very, very frustrated with the way things are going and the money that he spent that right now is basically just going right down the toilet, especially when it comes to the pitching. He talked about the sloppy play all around. Again, and we've mentioned this a lot with the Met team, and I know you know this, but he talked about this a lot with the sloppy play. Like, the Mets continue to find different ways to lose every single night. Every night it's a different way. And now, obviously, that's an exaggeration. Like, 80-plus games into the season, they haven't found a different way every night to lose. But it's almost true, because you had the Phillies game where they found a new way to lose. They walked 3 guys, hit 2 batters, made an error. And then the nights where their offense is on, they can't pitch. The night where their pitching's on, they can't hit. You saw that on Monday. They lost 2-1. Like, Verlander gave you a good outing. They put up 1 run. That can't happen. Last night, it was basically a little, Senga gave you a good outing. The bullpen struggled a little bit, but still, it's tough to win a game scoring 2 runs. I know the Brewers did it on Monday, but with the way the Mets season has gone, you're going to have to put up more runs than 2. Defensively, they've been ugly. They make errors. Some of the mental mistakes on the base pass. There's balls that drop in the field. We saw that in the Philly series. We saw it in the Subway series with Nimmo. There's balls that are dropping with the Mets that that little league players can catch. It's like balls are dropping between guys that are like they chant. It's funny because some of the balls that are dropping, like the expected batting average on these hits is like below 1. It's crazy to some of the hits that the Mets have let up, some of the plays they've made in the defense. There's been so much sloppy play. There's been so much ugliness, so much just gross baseball. And he mentioned it, and he kind of mentioned it a lot yesterday. Something I found interesting is, again, we kind of went into the press conference with thinking about what Steve Cohen might say. Would he go out and say, everything's okay, this thing's going to get, fixed, we're all right? Or was he going to go out and kind of give us a timeline, say, hey, within the next month, if things don't change, there's going to be changes. And he didn't necessarily say, oh, if things don't change in the next month, guys are getting fired, we're changing the whole roster. But he kind of hinted towards it. He mentioned about the trade deadline, and he said if things don't change where they currently are, again, 8.5 back in the wild card, 17 back in the division, 8 under 500. If things don't change coming into the wild card, anything is possible. He said we're going to prep for everything. We're prepping for everything. So potentially giving away veteran pieces. Potentially kind of, maybe just standing pat and not doing anything and just saying, you know what, it's a rough season. Let's say there's still 10 games under 500 by the wild card or by the trade deadline, and there's still a ways out of the wild card, and you're like, you know what, there's really we'll just address this in the offseason. This team's not going anywhere. Let's just ride it out these next 2 months, see what they can do, see if they can finish strong, figure out what veterans are going to fit, figure out what veterans don't fit, kind of have an open trial. Maybe call up some of the young guys and say, you know what, give the young guys burn. Let's see it. Maybe that's what they do. Maybe they just go out there and just keep the same team and just continue to roll it out there. We'll see. Maybe they sell. But he did hint that they're prepping for everything. If things don't change by the deadline, like the Mets are legitimate, they could definitely sell. They might trade away some of these bigger pieces, bring in more prospects, and readdress things in the offseason. So I thought that was interesting. I was kind of wondering what his standpoint was on that. Now, again, he also did mention he had a quote that said, if I'm in this position, I'm not adding. I think that would be pretty silly. I'd probably do very little if things don't improve. That was on the trade deadline. So he did say that they're prepping for everything. Somebody also asked, what would he, somebody also asked like a follow-up question on the deadline. And he basically said, look, again, I'll probably do very little. We're not adding. So, look, the Mets aren't probably going to be buyers. Unless if they somehow go on this, which, again, anything's possible, I guess, in baseball, like the Cincinnati Reds did. Unless if they somehow go on if they go on a stretch where they win, I don't know, 12 of their next 15, they go 12-3 over the next 15 games, and they're red hot. And maybe there's an 8-game win streak mixed in, and they just get above the 500 point, and all of a sudden, from where they are now, 9 games back in the wild card, maybe all of a sudden they find themselves by the deadline 3 games back in the wild card. And it's this is realistic. Then I think they'll change. But it's going to take a whole lot for this Met team to change. It's not going to take them getting within 3-4 games under 500 to say, oh, we're going to buy. It's going to take a full-on, you've got to be either at 500 or 3-4 games above 500 and be around that final wild card spot in order for them to buy. So They're running out of time, and they got about a month left. He talked about, too, it's hard to bring people in when firing everybody. He mentioned about not wanting to make a headline, not wanting to make I know everybody, or he said, he knows how everybody wants a headline. He knows how the fans want change. And, he knows how people are, always want change. Like, if things are struggling, fire this guy, fire that guy immediately. But he did mention, which to a certain extent is true, that he doesn't want not a toxic workplace, but he doesn't want this place to seem known that they're just going to fire everybody, be ruthless, and just get rid of everybody if things aren't going well. He wants to give guys a chance. He wants to give this team a chance because he feels it's going to be tough to add not only managers and front office people in the future, but also players if he's known to just fire everybody, if he's known to just make headlines, and if things start to go off track a little bit, if he's known for just getting rid of everybody. So it didn't seem like, look, he mentioned Epler and Buck remain the rest of the season, will they? He said absolutely. So he's not going to make a change. I didn't expect him to make a change. He's going to stand pat. He's going to let this thing ride out. I mean, if it gets really bad and they get to 15, 20 games under 500 and they go on some 7-8 game losing streak and the team has completely lost it and Buck Showalter looks lost out there, maybe he then changes his mind. But until where they are at now, it seems like he's just going to ride this thing out. Again, he still mentioned that he's looking for a president of baseball operations. The biggest name that comes up is Theo Epstein, who is a genius. Everywhere he goes, they win. If the Mets find a way to get him, we'll see. I mean, it would be huge. They talked about Theo Epstein earlier when they were looking for a president of baseball operations, when they were looking for a general manager. He did want to take some time to spend with his family. A couple years past now. Will he want to come back? We'll see. That's definitely been something that has been talked about a lot since Sandy Alderson's obviously out. He did mention about losing a lot of money this year. He is losing a lot of money. And, it's obviously frustrating. He's put in a lot into this team. They're not performing. He's losing a lot of money, and it's ugly. So, again, there's definitely – and, again, the guy's a billionaire. He has a ton of money. So I'm not trying to say that the guy's his financial situation, he's fine. He's fine in terms of his financial situation. He doesn't need to worry about, have no money. But he did mention that he is losing a lot, and that's obviously frustrating. Like that, he put a lot into this team, and it's ugly. Things all around for the organization right now are ugly. That's why I do think there is a sense of urgency for him to get this thing changed because he's pouring in a ton of money to this team. And for them just to go out there like they are and just flat out play pathetic like this, it's bad. So I wanted to mention this as well. He also mentioned, look, it's on the players. He said, I can't pitch and I can't hit, which is true. At the end of the day, it's on the players. Yes, there's blame to go around for when it comes to the manager and stuff like that, but there's certain things you can blame on the manager. There's certain things you can blame on the front office. There's certain things, everybody can be blamed. But at the end of the day, it is on the pitchers or it is on the players to go out there and perform. And up to this point, especially the veterans, haven't performed. He continues to talk about the farm system, how he wants to build it. And that was something that he said he wanted to do when he took over. Because the Wilpons, they destroyed the farm system. They invested nothing into the farm system, especially nothing with the pitching. There was no arms coming out of that farm system. The Wilpons were terrible. We all know that. One of the worst owners in New York sports, okay? They're up there with a couple of them. There's definitely a couple really poor owners in New York sports. The Wilpons were terrible. He mentioned how he continues wants to build the farm system, and he mentioned how he didn't directly mention the Wilpons, but he mentioned how, the pitching, he's had to go out and acquire big names like Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander because there's nobody in the farm. Going out and getting a Kodai Senga. And he kind of hinted towards, blaming Jeff Wilpon. And look, we understand Jeff Wilpon was bad. We understand the Wilpons were horrific. We understand that. But at the end of the day, they're in the past. They're in the rear view. Mets fans understand how bad they were, but I don't really think Mets fans want to hear any more about the Wilpons. At the end of the day, you're the owner now. Forget about the Wilpons. Their time is over. Like, he keeps blaming them. He keeps blaming the Wilpons, which, again, they did a horrible job. Like, they did nothing here. They spent no money. They invested nothing into the farm system. It was brutal. But he does have to change that. He got handed this. He bought the team. He realized what was at hand. He realizes what he had to do. And up to this point, I think he's done a good job so far with the farm system. They definitely got some top prospects. They definitely got some guys that have got some talent. They need some major league run, though. Like Vientos, I think, needs more opportunity. Like Beatty, again, he's struggled a little bit with the errors over the past couple games, but he's shown some promise. You got Beatty, you've got Alvarez, you've got Vientos, you've got Mauricio down there who is yet to be called up. So they've definitely got some young, promising guys. The pitching still coming, still waiting. He did talk about how, again, most teams are, teams are definitely built, there's definitely some teams that are built through free agency, but a lot of it is still through the farm system. Like, you look at a team in their division, the Braves. The Braves have definitely built some of it through, their, free agency, like bringing in Matt Olson and some of those guys like that. But some of these other prospects, like an Acuna, who was obviously their face of their franchise, those guys, came up with them, and those guys are, their face of the franchise. The Mets haven't had that. So they definitely need that when it comes to the pitching. The pitching's in a tough spot because, like, if Scherzer and Verlander are just straight up washed, where are they going to go? They don't really have any top pitchers right now in the farm system. That's kind of what he was pointing towards with Wilpon, but he wants to continue to build that. Not only does he want to spend money, but he's talked about investing into the farm system because there is nothing that the Wilpons did nothing with that farm system while they were there. So those are the main takeaways. Overall, I thought there was definitely a little bit of a sense of accountability. He mentioned how, the sloppy play. He mentioned it's on the players. He talked about, how if things don't change, there's going to be change at the trade deadline. Like, anything's on the table. He's prepping for anything, which I think potentially could put the players on notice in terms of, like, hey, if you're not playing well, you're going to get traded, So, and now, again, some of these guys have no trade clause. Like, we heard that Verlander might waive it. I don't know how that's all going to play out. Or not Verlander, I apologize. Scherzer. I don't know if that's all going to happen, if we're going to see that whatever happens, everything's on the table right now for the Mets. But things are definitely ugly right now. And again, he kind of started his press conference saying, look, it's been incredibly frustrating. I watch every game. I see what's going on, but here we are, and hopefully we can right the ship. He's frustrated, clearly. Mentioned my biggest takeaway was the trade deadline comment, because that to me was just basically putting the team, as I mentioned, putting the team on notice that said, hey, I'm prepping for everything. Like, if you're not playing well, you're out of here. I don't, that's kind of just how it is. From his standpoint, and hopefully maybe that lights a fire under the, maybe from a Mets fan perspective, you hope it lights a fire under the team. Obviously it didn't last night with the loss, but we'll see. It's just they've dug themselves into such a deep hole that there's really no getting out of it. It's just a matter of now, are they going to sell, or are they going to stay pat? If I had to guess, they're probably going to stand pat and then readdress this in the offseason, readdress kind of where they're going, if they want to stick with, not stick with exactly what they got, but readjust the Buck Showalter stuff. Look, to me, I don't see how Buck Showalter survives this season. Like, if they don't make the playoffs, I don't care what their final record is. Even if they maybe get hot and maybe they start to play better, like, I don't care what their final record is. If they miss the playoffs, Buck Showalter's got to be out of here. 2 years as Mets head coach, Mets manager, for the highest payroll in baseball, to lose in the wild card game and to miss the playoffs, that's ugly. So I don't think you can survive that. You can make the argument Billy Epler doesn't survive either, especially if he's looking for a president of baseball operations, which doesn't mean that his job's on the line, because he's been saying that forever now, but it's definitely in the conversation. All right, so now we get you ready for the games tonight. Yankees, A's tonight. You got Clark Schmidt on the mound. It doesn't appear that the A's have yet decided who's pitching for them tonight. So they'll they've probably already made a decision. They just haven't released it yet. But Clark Schmidt on the bump tonight. He's 2-6 with a 4.23 ERA or 4.32 ERA. But Schmidt this year's been, he's been much better recently. In the month of June, he's pitched to a 2.53 ERA. So he's been very good this month. We'll see what he can do tonight. They go for the series win against the Oakland A's. We'll see what Clark Schmidt can do for an encore coming off the perfect game last night from Domingo German. We'll see if he can finish June strong. And as for the Mets tonight, final game of a 4-game set against the Brewers. Adrian Hauser's on the mound. He's 2-2 with a 4.0 ERA. And for the Mets, they've got Scherzer. He's 7-2 with a 3.95 ERA. Mets look to even up the series. Brewers look for the series win. Obviously, the Mets have not won a series at all this month, so the best they can do is to split. And we'll see. We'll see what they can do tonight before welcoming in San Francisco for 3 games on Friday, which I believe Verlander will start. Carrasco, I think, gets game 1 of that series. And then I think Verlander gets game 2, I believe, or something like that. They mixed it up a little bit because Verlander went Monday, Scherzer going today. So they're not like 1-2 in the rotation like they've been over the past couple weeks, or over the majority of the season. So we'll see what they can do. Yankees, Mets tonight. Yankees, after this, get on the plane, go to St. Louis, finish up the 3 games there, come back home for a big 4-game set against Baltimore that hopefully includes Carlos Rodon's start. So on top of the Domingo German perfect game last night, you've got Rodon coming back, rotations getting healthier. All we can do is just hope Judge is back. And at this point, he threw yesterday before the game. So any type of baseball activity is good for Judge. Anything is good for him. I know it's not much, but any little thing from Herman or from Judge is, I guess, good. Yeah, he's still got a ways to go, but we'll see. So that'll do it for the podcast here today. We'll come back tomorrow, finish it all off for the week. Stay tuned. Either today or tomorrow, I'll have an In the Trench to a Gang Green podcast up. I'll be talking biggest training camp competitions going into training camp, looking at like the 3-4 biggest ones because there's definitely a couple of them. Obviously, the tackle position's a big conversation, so I'll get into that. The Jets also released their training camp dates, so I'll get into that as well. Won't dissect it too much, but we'll get into that and look at some other moves that the Jets could make, other moves that we continue to want them to make as we creep closer here into July. Training camp starts for the Jets, rookies and vets. Report July 19th. So we are less than a month away from training camp for the New York Jets, and then obviously the Hall of Fame game will be August 3rd. So we are very close. I think we're 5 weeks away from the Hall of Fame game, 10 weeks away from the start of the NFL season. So things are getting closer to football gets closer every day. And I'll also have my series recap podcast up probably tomorrow. Yankees A series recap pod. We'll have that up tomorrow. On Apple Podcasts, Bubbs talking Bronx Bombers. So stay tuned for that. Looking forward to doing that. Looking forward to talking about the Domingo German perfect game. And then obviously on Sunday, we'll have the Yankees-Cardinals series recap up. Have series recaps up after each and every Yankees series. So stay tuned. A lot more content coming your way. We'll see you all back here tomorrow to close out the week. As always, hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for watching.